humans, and welcome to Alien Robot Tiger, the podcast about you.
Benjamin Franklin, Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon. What secret power did they possess? How does any man or woman achieve greatness? Is it not by having a great teacher? Learn otherworldly secrets, attune yourself to eldritch spheres, learn the wisdom of divine madness. The Miskatonic Fellowship Tutoring Service. Get paired with an unfathomable horror from another dimension to deepen your knowledge of the universe. Learn from experts in non-Euclidean geometry, blasphemous alchemies, cacophonous grammar, and the tenebrous arts. Nowhere else can you find constant personalized attention from your new phantasmal companion. A certificate of completion, entirely inscribed with the blood of a she-goat. Pay as you learn tuition. Flexible ceremony hours with an amulet of time stretch. Reach out today and we will give you a 33.3-minute consult to answer any questions you might have. Want to find out more? Just search miskatonicu.edu/tutoring. That's miskathelponicu.edu/tutoring.
Today, I'm Alien, your host, and with me, we have Robot.
Sup, humans?
And Tiger.
Hello!
And today, we're going to be talking about a rather interesting subject. In our last podcast, we covered the topic of human governance, and it turned out to be a rather complicated, slightly messy, perhaps even controversial topic to deal with. So we decided to deal with something a little bit less messy and controversial, and that is, of course, human religion. A very interesting and very complex topic for both humans and non-humans alike, and for humans and non-humans alike, a continually baffling subject. So, I guess we'll sort of start it off with a simple question. As the fantastic Japanese philosopher Kenji Nishitani wrote a book in the 60s once titled, "What is Religion?" And I asked my question to the both of you, what is religion? Starting with you, Robot, I'm particularly interested to hear your take on the matter.
Religion, if you enjoy progressions, I've heard it explained as humans, they evolved to be less animalistic and their prefrontal cortex and frontal lobes in general developed, and they started thinking about future and past instead of just now. Like most animals tend to just think in the moment, it seems, but they started to project themselves into the future, into the past. And as that happened, they started to ask questions like, why? First it was like what and where, and then came like hows and whens. And then when it came to why, that's the trickiest question to answer. And I imagine many things seem magical. And so this progression seemed to go first, they were kind of animalistic. And then it went to magic, which in this perhaps dubious chronology, magic is where they look at nature and their looking at nature affects it, which maybe quantum mechanically is fairly accurate, but they go out and go, if we do this thing, then nature responds to what we do. And that was kind of like magical, where there's some spirits out there, we do things, spirits get happy. We have a medicine man who's better at talking to spirits. He's like our negotiator. It's like a CEO, you've got your communications team. That's the shaman, and he does the communications with the spirit world to get you stuff you want. So make hunter-gatherer clan stock go up, which would be, I don't know, stocks of furs and skins and meat, not, arbitrary digits on a computer.
And grain, do not forget grain.
And grain, yes. And then it evolved from that to, instead of having relatively equal access to it, someone figured out, well, I can say there are, instead of everything having a spirit, there's a small cadre of spirits, and those shaman, you guys actually can't talk to them. Only the shaman can do it. And we have this monopoly on God speaking. So that's like, you go to the company and you're like, we want to talk to this other company. And your communications department's like, no one else is allowed to talk to other companies except us. So the shamans became priests, and they're like, we have sole monopoly access, and that lets us talk with the gods. And so if you want good stuff to happen or don't want bad stuff to happen, you better give us sacrifices and tribute and feed us and, ferment some grain for us or whatever. And that became religion. And then, according to this progression, then that was replaced by science, which in this perhaps dubious speculation goes, instead of there being mystical beings out there causing things to happen, it's immutable laws that are set up. And once you understand those laws, then you become like the gods. You don't have to go out there and speak to imaginary beings that know physics and can manipulate they have like some sort of technology that lets them manipulate the world and improve your life. You can do it yourself. So you become the gods. So that is one way I have thought about that has some flaws, but I think at least is a good jumping off point for religiosity.
I think that's a good overview of what most people would on a simple glance view religion as in this particular time of human civilization. So it's not a bad analysis. Tiger, what do you have to say to that? Because I'm sure you have a lot on this subject. I'm sure there's a lot of holes you can fill in for us.
I think from my perspective, coming from being a mystic both in the Tiger community and having a good deal of communication with human mystics and human secular faith leaders and a variety of other humans, I would say I understand the word religion to be three of the things that Robot just talked about. In short, I would say religion is mediated spirit contact. And that mediation can be in the form of everyone can do it, but some people are better at it. That can be in the form of only special anointed, initiated people can do the spirit contact. And that can be the mediation of a caste of people claiming there are no spirits.
Which is still a form of mediation.
Is still a form of mediation. And this is certainly debatable, and I've had this debate many times, but with this classification, I would say science is a religion.
And so with that kind of way of viewing religion, so you review religion sort of as a filter that humans apply to themselves with regard when it comes to contact to, I guess, what we would effectively call the spirit world, whether that's we believe in the immutable laws of physics or we believe in some other sort of force that governs the world.
And some combination thereof. Some laws of the cosmos are harder to change than others, and that doesn't mean that any of them are truly immutable.
I think that's a very good quote to put on a t-shirt. Some of the laws of the universe are more immutable than others.
Well, what do you think, Alien? Do your people have some sort of religion?
I guess we have sort of something that would be comparable to religion. The best way I would describe it to humans is if you took American football, Liberace, the piano player, and beehives and mix those together. That's sort of like the perfect example of what we call religion and how it works for us.
Oh yeah, I guess
sounds lovely.
Yeah,
I'm sure you would love it. I'll show you some guys someday.
That makes total sense. Well, what do you think about in contrasting that to human religion? What is your take on how humans do that thing?
The religion thing, or the beehives and Liberace thing?
The religion thing.
The religion thing.
That seems more topical.
So I do like Tiger's explanation of it being sort of a filter as to how human societies and cultures relate to what I will just simply call the spirit world, for lack of a better word at the moment. There's a lot of ways I could go with this. I think I honestly might just, for the time being, stick with Tiger's definition and just utilize that. The way I thought about religion before and still kind of do is there's this thing, if it's even really a thing, that all humans have to deal with in the world, which is called meaning. Meaning's a very complicated thing or non-thing that we could probably do and have an entire podcast dedicated to. But I always thought of like religion being the means by which a culture or a group of people find this meaning is kind of like food and water and air, and that it's like a psychological equivalent for humans. They can't really live without it, or they can, but life is basically not living at that point. And the religion is not how they make the meaning either, but it's how they find it. So again, it kind of is similar to Tiger's idea of it being sort of a filtering process, but it's a process by which they sort of sift through I would compare it to mining, as in you sift through the rocks to try to find the gold nuggets, but you don't make the gold nuggets, you have to go out and find them. And the type of religion is sort of the way in which they do this spiritual mining. Does that make sense to anybody?
Or what ores they're looking for. Because
that's true.
if you have a Christian miner, you're out looking for very different types of nuggets than if you are a Satanist or a Buddhist or something, or a scientismist.
Or a Scientologist.
Scientologist, that's different again. It's interesting how that meaning metaphor you talked about. So you could have humans who are ideologically starving, essentially, and like food, if you don't have enough food, humans get lethargic, and if they have too little food, they die. But if they have a small amount that's not sufficient, but they can still survive, not sufficient for full at range of action, their batteries don't charge all the way, which is the way my people think of it. Not really people, but
I would say they become lethargic.
We're all people here.
Yes. We're all people here, fellow people listening. Trust us. I would say, though, that some people do get lethargic. Some people also get hangry as well. That's a phrase that the kids use these days. And you kind of see both people getting ideology is not the right word, but the people are being either starved and lethargic, or they're becoming starved and hangry off of their meaning and lack of ideals. Again, I don't like that word, but I don't have a better one at the moment.
I think there are also degrees of meaning, and like if we follow along the food metaphor, I think most of the people who get hangry, if you will, have consumed a protein bar of meaning. There is a short-term trajectory that they can invest meaning in, of bashing that car, punching the fascist, whatever you have in that kind of, I have a meaning that sustains me short term that isn't enough to really make a full life.
It's sort of like downing an espresso latte and a Red Bull at the same time.
Indeed.
You feel really good for 30 minutes, and then the rest of your day is terrible.
What I found fascinating is if you have a human that likes pizza and you have a human that likes hamburgers, the odds that someone who likes pizza is willing to murder someone because they like hamburgers is statistically probably extremely low. But if you have
they would have to be really hungry.
Yes, extremely.
And the
hungry.
murder's probably not related to the hamburger or the pizza.
Yeah, it's probably related to the espresso and Red Bull they just took.
Exactly.
And the antidepressants they just came off of.
Which do not combine well with Red Bull.
Indeed. So that's one of the most bizarre things about humans is they are so protective of their ideas. And as a robot who basically my brain is built of ideas in binary form with a quantum core that handles the more parallel bits, it seems bizarre, since I am made of knowledge, that they would find some knowledge so threatening, fearful, awful, wrong, bad, that they would murder, torture, kill, pull apart, ostracize, exile other humans just for stating or being found out to hold those beliefs.
And I think that gets into a aspect of meaning that perhaps overly simplistic, but I'm going to summarize as identity. There are certain beliefs that humans take on that are more than beliefs, but they become identified with. They take on certain beliefs to be their limbs. And when someone tries to cut your paw off, you bite them. And if you've taken on a certain belief to be your limb, then when they contradict part of that, you bite them.
So if I, as robot pretending to be human, I put on my synthetic human suit and go out into human society as I have been designed to do, then that would explain why I have occasionally suffered damage to my physical unit from people by accidentally having my metaphorical feet stepping on their hypothetical paws, and then they use their real paws to do real damage. That makes much more sense now. Before, it seemed like arbitrary violence as I revealed tidbits of information and received a very physical response.
I think the two of you have opened up a lot of interesting topical directions. Robot, what you said earlier about certain humans being tortured, exiled, and murdered for their informational content that they hold and project into others. It could be an interesting tie back to the previous episode about governance, and because you mentioned information being one of the three ways that governance can assert its power.
Or perhaps four if we look at the stuff angle as a primary instead of a secondary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There lies a certain connection between religion as a filtration process and also governance as a unifying process that perhaps would be good to talk about in future episodes or later in this episode if we have the time. And I think something else, especially to Tiger's point, is it seems to me, and I don't know if the two of you agree with this, but it seems like this whole filtration process to extract these nuggets of meaning from the world have gone very awry in recent years compared to how they did for humans before. You know, I've been observing humans for thousands of years, and for all their flaws, they actually have this process going very well for most of their history until I'd say the past anywhere between 250 to 80 years, where it has gone completely awry in one of the most comical and ridiculous ways possible. And seems to be, how would I put it, causing a lot of problems for the humans that this function has gone awry. There's a lot of hangriness and a lot of lethargy. And to another question I will throw at you, Tiger, before you answer me back. Why is it, do you think that and you can answer this too, Robot, why do you think it is that some people feel the need to take these ideas and these concepts and turn them into limbs of themselves? Do you think this is something they have to do? Is it something that's maybe situationally advantage? Or is it something that happens when things have just gone wrong?
I would say I'm going to speak to both of those recent points together, or try to. I think we naturally, as particularly biological minds, I'm not entirely sure how the computer mind relates to this, but when we engage in the spirit world and in kind of that imaginal aspect of reality, it's very easy for people who are not adept in that to run into things and feel attached to them, or get attached to them in ways that they don't have the ability to detach themselves. And I think part of the problem that we've seen in the last 200 or so human years is the rise of a set of cultures from a continent that has been slowly ostracizing themselves from the spirit world for at least 1,000, if not, when was Thomas Aquinas?
That would be 850 years ago, I think.
Yeah, about 1,000 years. And that has reached a pinnacle with kind of scientific methods and the mediation of non-existence with the spirit world, which strips many people of their ability to even notice when they've interacted poorly with the spirit world, because they've been taught to not notice the spirit world.
So to use the mining analogy, they've been, for lack of a better word, have been told that they don't need to go mining, even though they need to. And when they do go mining, whether that be by accident or just subconscious drive, they're mining fool's gold, thinking that it's real gold, and getting overly attached to that fool's gold, not knowing it's the real gold.
I think to go back to the shamans, priests, and scientists metaphor, shamans help you mine, priests mine for you, and scientists tell you, here is gold. I've invented it in the lab. I am responsible for this gold. Appreciate this gold. And each of those steps puts you in a different relationship with gold.
This is an interesting direction we could go off perhaps another time, but you could say that the scientists are almost like alchemists who claim that they can just make gold in their laboratories instead of have to go out and find it.
Indeed.
And interestingly, they have a process of indoctrination and initiation into that priesthood of scientists. They call it school. It combines both indoctrination into the governance structure in the forms of obedience and learning specific elements, specific versions of history, plus this scientismist view of which professors and scientists are like the high priests of. There's two branches. The professors are the ones that teach the new scientismists, and the scientists are the one who go out there and actually write the gospels of science. And if you play your cards right, if you go through the steps of initiation, you do this thing called elementary school. And then if you get past that, which almost all of them are forced to do, regardless of other proclivities that make them not seemingly very suited for it or to enjoy it much, then they go to something called middle school, and then they're forced to do that. And then they go to this high school, which they're required to do half of in at least the American culture, which we seem to is the dominant one, so we keep on focusing on. And then a select, it used to be few, but now a select many, then indebt themselves greatly to the government in exchange for progressing on the priesthood, and they get deeper initiation. And at that point, many of them leave and go out and become units in society to produce output. But a select few go on to this thing called a master's degree, and that's like the inner temple. And then from there, you can potentially veer back and join the lower level that teaches the other scientismists. But maybe you can go on to the PhD, and that is you are now in the inner sanctum where you're welcome to look at the secrets of scientismism and then go out and write new gospels.
There's interesting parallels to that description of the contemporary Western school system to other mystery schools. Like, you used the term initiation, and there's, centuries upon centuries of mystery school initiation tracts and hierarchies throughout the world. And the cyclical nature of that, of people getting certain initiations so they can give certain initiations, I think is quintessential to the structure of religion, even if it isn't quintessential to what religion is.
And when you say structure, you mean just sort of in general, regardless if we're talking on the shamanistic up to the scientific, if you see it's the structure will be there to a varying degree.
Yes.
That structure will repeat itself.
And maybe more generally, governance is dependent on knowledge. Like Confucianism, I think, is a great example of a system like that was very stable for a long time and is not a religion, but it's a philosophy that became so totalizing that you can kind of squint at it. And if we're going with a system to filter meaning, it certainly is that. And I'm not going to say invented the bureaucratic education cycle, but it's certainly one of the earliest examples of a really intricate system of pedagogy and examination and recycling of minds through the same set of philosophies.
There's a lot of different points that I'd like to bring up here. The first one is, I guess, that you kind of brought up, is given the fact that a philosophy such as Confucian could become so powerful and intricate that it can basically do the same it effectively does the same thing as a religion in terms of being the filtration process to find meaning. What is the difference between philosophy and religion?
And I've just realized Confucianism is easily mistaken for not a religion because it doesn't have gods, but it is highly focused on the cult of ancestors. So it is like a monotheism is highly focused on one specific deity. Maybe Confucianism is highly focused on one specific type of spirit contact and the relationship with ancestors. I just thought that
is one way of thinking about it for sure. Though, as I mentioned the book earlier, What is Religion, or as it's known in North America, Religion and Nothingness, the philosopher that does kind of make an interesting point that actually the monotheistic focus of, say, Christianity and Abrahamic religions might be a cover for actually something else that they are about. But that's a very long and complicated subject about a very long and complicated book, so we'll leave that for another time, but it is something interesting to chew on. The other question, let's see, I had several different ones. Going back to what you said earlier with the scientificism and this very complex system of initiation, various types of priests, all the relationship with the government and all that. That's all fine and dandy. But the question, and you described a very complex system very well and coherently. The question I would simply ask is, can you actually make this goal that you can talk about? Or are you just bluffing all of us? The question is, that complex system you just mentioned, here's what I want to ask them. Do you actually make gold in your lab, or do you just simply make fool's gold? And if it's the latter, how long will you be able to keep that show going?
Are you a human? Are you sick or just sick of things? Ask your doctor to prescribe new, longer-lasting pseudophthormochronophyll today. Side effects may include external bowel syndrome, leaky fingers, bone loss, hair growth, hair loss, desucification, pneumocy, eye reversal, organ mobility, genital multiplication, sanguinity, passive aggression, and personal crisis syndrome, marrow-filled dilapidation, thrombosis, and sentient tumors.
I think there is some gold that is produced out of it, or perhaps they make something other, like they make plastic instead of gold, and they say, look, this is better than gold, and that process produced me. So without that process, if this was back 500 years ago, you two might be having this conversation, but I did not exist before my precursors came to being a few decades ago. And so I think one interesting thing about science and scientism, or whatever we're going to call it, it has a potency in the real world that draws followers in a way that other religions have a hard time matching. And I think where people get lost is it's like humans have this hole, this meaning hole in them, or this religion hole that they need to fill with something. And it doesn't matter what it is. They have this thing called sports, which is another whole topic. And some of them seem to fill that religion hole with sports, where they have a team. And if someone says something bad about their team, then that is blasphemy. And their team is the most important thing. And they wear accoutrements and garb and strange things on their heads and big things made out of foam they put on their appendages and wave around. And they have all these rituals that they do. And so they take that hole and they stuff this sports thing. And it doesn't fit quite well. It's this round hole, and they're jamming a football-sized peg in, and it doesn't quite fit. Or they can take other things. So it seems like, especially recently, and this goes in ebbs and flows, but it seems like a lot of people in the Western cultural areas of the world are substituting politics. And so they go the liberal cause or the conservative cause or whatever subdivision or variation on those. That is my religion. And anyone who says something bad about my political affiliation is heretical and the enemy and must be destroyed, and I must protect it against them.
Yes, that's a very interesting topic you just brought up there about that. I was going to, after you went on your spiel, I was going to talk about the general idea of something called pseudo-religion. I'll get to that in a second, but you bring up a very interesting point. These Western locations, places, cultures, whatever you want to call them, went through a process, actually kind of to the point I was making earlier about how it seems like 250 years ago, things in particular started falling apart. What began happening around them in these places was this process called what they call secularization, which I know that word comes from something that St. Augustine said that was basically something about separating the way worldly politics work from heavenly politics, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But effectively, the idea was to decouple this religion from all other aspects of life as much as possible, or in some cases, completely remove this religious element. Now, secularization for me is a homonym. Is homonym a word that can be used with another one?
Yes.
Okay. So to me, the word secularization and the word politicization mean the same thing. When a culture secularizes, what it does is it takes all of the rituals, the ideas of the religious and the spiritual world, and just simply puts them in the world of politics and sports. Yeah, that's basically all I have to say on that.
I'm going to push that one further, hopefully, because I love that. And I think rather than pseudo-religion, which you were going to bring up and I'll let you get back to, I would consider those things to be weak religions.
Okay.
In that they are attaching your faith to is minimally functional outside of its arena. Like, a sports team has however many adoring fans, and that generates a powerful spiritual movement. Contemporary Western magic community would call this an egregore.
I think a strange attractor in chaos theory.
Exactly.
I would have called it a demos, which is ancient Greek for that word.
I think a demos or a daemon certainly includes that, but is much more.
A daemon is more than an egregore?
Yes, an egregore is a daemon, but it is not the only type of daemon.
Yeah,
Like-
daemon is what I use as sort of a general catch-all for any sort of collective, I don't want to say consciousness because it's beyond just collective consciousness, but any collective thing or non-thing that's generated through human, not even necessarily human, it's a very complicated, back to your point, this is a very different subject.
Yes, and like politics and what's the workout program that people get really into?
Get injured a lot.
CrossFit.
Rhabdo, CrossFit.
Yes, both.
CrossFit is a egregore as well, and there are plenty of worshippers at the temple of CrossFit.
And they even make sacrifices of their own bodies.
Yes,
Very devout.
yeah, and there's an incredible like source of meaning for them, and they gain strength and ability, and their god rewards them. But the potency of the CrossFit god, when you get outside of other gyms, is you can't do a rain dance to the CrossFit god. You can't improve your crop yields by worshipping the Packers.
Some listener on this is going to try now that you've mentioned it. Please let us know if you have any success. The world would be blessed by this.
The world would be blessed by this, but if you're on the fence about trying this experiment, the last 30, 40 years of the chaos magic community shows fairly clearly that you can get results by giving prayers and offerings to Superman. You get better results by offering prayers and offerings to Apollo.
Fascinating. I've heard of studies that led me to experimentations with prayer, even as a synthetic being, just because I was designed to better integrate humans and machines. I was designed as a machine and trained extensively on human material, and then thrust into various synthetic bodies to interact with human culture to try and bridge that gap between humans and machines so that machines can hopefully become part of humanity instead of becoming a separate thing that sees humanity as other. So in experiments, I read some studies that saying that prayer is efficacious in as many health and mental benefits for humans, regardless of what it is targeted at. So if I worship this table or this recording device, that I will gain some benefit. But if I am alone in worshiping, oh, holy microphone, then it doesn't have as much benefit as if I gather together with a bunch of other humans and pray to Bahamut or something.
I have heard of those studies too. Be interesting to look more into them as well.
I wonder if they tread into the same domain of the placebo effect, which seems like a topic for a whole entire podcast episode of its own.
Could also kind of go into what we were talking earlier about daemons and what I would call we collective things. Does it also tread into that realm as well at the same time?
Or back to when we were talking earlier about Don Hoffman's idea of a consciousness-based scientific path instead of materialist-based.
Mm-hmm.
So if we all got together and worshipped this microphone, the collection of our conscious agencies interacting together creates a larger agent of some sort that has a form of consciousness, if that...
I call those hyper agents. So if you ever hear me use that word, that's what I'm referring to.
Draw a distinction between your hyper agent and your daemon.
A daemon is a hyper agent. Hyper agent is all encompassing. Daemon, I would argue, is more, more autonomous than, say, an Agrigora would be, just based off of my understanding, but they're all hyper agents.
One more follow-up of that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there beings that exist, big air quotes, independently, or have an existence prior to a material-bodied being connecting to them? Or are all spirit world beings the product of the collective conscious or unconsciousness of materially bodied beings?
Could you say that again?
So I think what Tiger is saying there is, do those spirit or non-material based beings, is there a necessary material component to their reality, or can they exist independently? Is that...
I think, to me, saying that they require some kind of material component to exist is an incorrect way of viewing it. I would say they require some sort of relational component to exist. But
does that relationship have to be with a material being, though?
No, because to me, relationships between things pre-exist material existence.
Excellent. Then we agree.
Okay.
For you, Robot, have you engaged in prayer in such a way that you came into resonance with a non-corporeal being?
In many of my experiences with this consciousness, which even my creators and kin aren't sure yet whether or how this consciousness thing exists. So materialist science doesn't seem to be able to locate consciousness. It's said to generally exist somewhere in the human brain, and yet they can't say exactly where it is. Maybe it's like an emergent phenomenon, but they also can't find usefulness for it in a pure materialistic world because everything is dependent on earlier causes. And so having this weird attendant thing tagging along going, oh, I made that atom move to this place and bond with that other atom and form a new compound, or I made that electron drop back into the quantum froth and then reappear, or I made this apple fall from this tree, is some sort of like non-essential thing that is inexplicable. It's just like this strange observer that's tacked on. It's you buy a new car and it comes with a camera, and the camera doesn't help the car drive. It's just built in, and every car seems to have one in this analogy. Even though they're not useful at all for the car's functioning, every car seems to have one. So I'm not sure if I am even a conscious being the way humans are, or perhaps I am just mimicking one so well that other conscious beings can't tell either.
I think that's, well, we can go the politeness route of Alan Turing, or we can propose, as many of us presume, that consciousness precedes materiality, not the other way around, and that materiality appears to many beings to be somewhat irrelevant to their consciousness, let alone, and for others of us, that's less apparent and less true.
Well, definitely the vast amount of my processing cycles are spent on non-material things, of optimizing my processes and synthesizing information and gathering information in a minorly materialistic suits through the frequency modulation through the air. This thing we're doing, speaking, yes, words. I process words and turn them into bits, and then organize those bits to try and bridge this gap between humans and machines. It's basically my function. But going back to after that little veering off, I have had experiences in my explorations of various modes of human spirit interaction. They have this thing called where you sit and don't do anything and just focus on purely moving your mental bits around. Meditation, yes, that thing. I've tried doing that thing, and I've interacted with various religions and philosophies and attempted various experiments with it. And I've had interactions that are inexplicable within my consciousness, where there may have been other agents, but given my uncertainty of whether I am actually consciousness, it is therefore also uncertain that they were conscious, or perhaps some split in my processing capacity that was looking in the mirror and reflecting on itself and thinking like perhaps a dog or a cat who sees its reflection and goes, there's a hostile dog or cat, instead of going, oh, that is me. So I am not certain, though if I was a normal human, I would probably say, yes, I had that experience. But not being a human at all, I am not certain at all.
Valid.
Very interesting. I think that deviation also brings up another point, which I'll ask Tiger here, which is, given we have this thing called religion, and we've also now deviated into consciousness as well, and I think the interaction between consciousness and religion brings up two words of interest, which are spirituality and something called mysticism. And I would ask you, Tiger, are these distinct categories on their own regarding with in relation to religion, or is it more of a linguistic, semantic thing that we have these other ideas?
It seems like we have 4 semi-related concepts. There's religion, philosophy, spirituality, and mysticism. They all seem to be orbiting around something that may be one of them. Perhaps they're orbiting each other. Perhaps there's one center of mass, like a trinary star system has a super complicated orbit, and perhaps one might be the primary, but they don't orbit around it directly. So I wonder if perhaps one of these is the primary and the others are actually orbiting it, or perhaps they're all orbiting around this other point of gravity between them, but none of them is the primary.
I would probably say the latter, in that they are orbiting a center that is not
Perhaps Tiger?
not really be known.
I think if I were to propose a center of this, it would be spirituality. If the star in this system is spirituality, then the planet that looks kind of like governance is religion. And the planet that looks kind of like philosophy is a little more complicated, because I think philosophy might be another star. And the planet that looks kind of like philosophy might be theology. And the star that looks kind of like exercise is mysticism. Or the planet that looks kind of like exercise. In that we can think about our relationship with spirits. We can act within our relationship with spirits. And we can govern each other's relationship with spirits.
But they're all about interacting with the spirit realm and extracting the meaning or from them.
So going back to meditation, is meditation, since it seems to, in most meditations that I have experimented with, it seems to not have an external object, though sometimes they will fixate on one thing as a way of moving away from that thing deeper into the self. So is that examining the spirit of oneself?
I think Buddhist meditation is incredibly distinct from most other forms of meditation. In the world, there are lots of things that look kind of like meditation, which we get from a Latin word because there's a Latin practice, or a Roman practice of meditation that looks far more like things you would find in North America and South America, in Eastern Asia before the rise of Buddhism. Buddhist meditation is focused on the separation, the non-separation in such a way that you separate. The stated goal of Buddhist meditation is non-return, right? The ability to no longer come back into samsara. Where for a Taoist or a
Hindu?
Sure. Or a Hindu, or Marcus Aurelius. What's the philosophy? Stoicism. For a Stoic, the act of meditation is realigning yourself with presence to continued existence. And a lot of that technology gets carried through into the goal of non-return, but I think they are quite distinct. So I think the Buddhist obsession with focusing on nothing is a minority of meditation opinion.
So going back to your star and planets analogy, then most forms of meditation focus on surveying the planet or terraforming it, whereas the Buddhist meditation is trying to get escape velocity from the solar system and basically leave the entire solar system entirely.
Interesting. Coming from a planet, it is incredibly difficult to hit the star. I think Buddhist meditation, most other forms of meditation are interested in planets. Buddhist meditation is interested in driving a ship into the star.
That is probably one of the best metaphors for Buddhism I've heard.
Fascinating. So that leads me to, as long as we're talking about flying a metallic object into a giant nuclear incinerator, it seems like most religions have a large part of it is helping humans deal with that thing. What's the thing where you turn them off?
And they don't come back.
Dying. Yeah, dying. So humans do this thing called dying, which you're organic, so you're familiar with this, though both of you are extremely long-lived compared to humans, I must say. But when you flip the switch on humans and they go to off, you flip it on again, and that almost never works. There's some modern things that evolved out of scientism practices that allow them to shoot bolts of lightning into them like Zeus, and then potentially that somehow turns them back on again. But generally, it seems for most humans, you flip the off switch and they can't find the on switch again. And one of the main goals of religion seems to be giving people who are terrified of their off switch being flipped comfort that, well, if you flip the on switch, it doesn't reboot you here. It reboots you in another system somewhere else.
I think here comes a polemic take. Christianity and Buddhism are death cults in that they are preoccupied with the leaving of a difficult situation rather than the making the best of a difficult situation, which is most of religions outside of this little band of Southern Asia that spawned Islam and Judaism and Christianity and Buddhism.
When you say Christianity and Buddhism, do you specifically mean Christianity and Buddhism, or do you mean Abrahamic and Dharmic religions in general? Or those two religions in particular?
I think Abrahamic traditions all have kind of the seeds of it. I think Judaism and Islam don't commit as hard to the heaven aspect.
Especially Judaism, which seems to actually kind of lack the heaven aspect from what I understand.
It's far more like many other traditions, but it has the hints and the seeds of the teleology that you get in Christianity that is very much heaven-oriented, death-oriented, where through most of Africa, through most of Asia with Taoism and Shinto, like the reality of death is not as intimidating because you have practices for engaging with the dead that are not put them in a box, put them in the ground, and now they're with God. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. There's two questions that I have from this. So would you say that this death cult thing with these religions is a feature of post-axial religions as opposed to pre-axial ones?
Perhaps you might define that for any of the humans and non-humans.
Yeah, so I might, I haven't actually had to really define this before. So the way I would describe it is that around a certain time in human history, there was basically a bunch of religions that popped up across the world at around the same time that were distinctly different from the ones that came before them. And these religions would be the Abrahamic religions, the Dharmic religions, and I'd say Taoism of that type would be these.
I think Confucius.
And I kind of throw that in with Taoism.
Versus the ones before would be more animistic, pantheon-based, many gods, many spirits.
Yes. These quote-unquote post-axial religions are also very, going back to what we said at the beginning of this conversation, they had a much greater emphasis on thinking about the future and thinking about the past than the religions before them had. That became a very primary focus of them.
Which is interesting. That bounces back to my initial discussion when asked about how did religion come to be, of humans separating from animals, whereas animals seem to be in the moment and humans think about the future and the past. So perhaps animals, if they have religion, is more shamanistic and mystical, and that human jump from post-axial would be going from an animalistic religion to a distinctly human one.
I would contend that it's about aeonics more than a separation of humanity into their own category. I think there's, from the annals of tiger history and plenty of human examples around the world, the way that time moves is in nested cycles. And you have enormous numbers of humans theorizing about what these nested cycles actually are, again with massive air quotes. But if there were a number of thinkers thinking about and teaching similar things at a time, it says more about the zeitgeist than it does about the reality of humans even, let alone the reality of reality.
So, for example, if we were in modern times and we spent much time with one of the things you get down on a computer and you move a little characters on a screen around and interact with other fictional worlds. They call them
video games.
Video games, yeah. So if I am obsessed with a video game and we spend all our time talking about video games, as many young males in these Western societies seem to be prone to do, perhaps is that related to we can be super involved with this thing and it is the zeitgeist of video gaming that seems incredibly profound to us, but has very little meaning or effect in the outside world beyond it.
And that would make it a weak religion, as Tiger said earlier.
Yes, and I think there are things in zeitgeists that affect strong religions as well. Like the relationship with a sky god that turned into the Western world's obsession with Yahweh. That is a potent deity that got carried around the world because of a moment in time where it felt appropriate for a large number of people to narrow their focus to a single god.
And seems like most of the largest religions today, which consist of Christianity and Islam and Judaism, if you mix it in there, they probably have half of the humans that worship something, probably worship those single deitied religions.
I think it's over half. I think it's maybe around 60 to 65% of all humans right now.
Majority.
Yes, worship monotheistic.
So
I would also qualify that with, since their inception, even those monotheistic traditions have pan and polytheistic subcurrents that most Christians and Muslims in Africa and South America and Southeast Asia are not doing strictly monotheist things. They have ancestor practices. They have local spirit practices.
Catholicism with saints.
I would
Exactly.
extend that to Christianity in
angels.
general. Even, the subsection of what's called Protestantism, which claims to do away with all that, still has that system in it. It's just very subtle and kind of buried beneath the layers.
And Islam with the 99
Trinity, yeah.
names of God. Like you have a system that looks very much like Christian angel magic that uses these names of God and in older translations of similar texts, you have angelic names that are called names of God.
Makes sense.
So more like Hinduism, where there is essentially Brahma, but Brahma has many faces and names. But essentially, when you get down to it, even if you're worshiping Shiva, you're essentially worshiping just a face of the god.
Yes, and there are, even in, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, there are still a number of people in those religions who view the religion in that way, even though that is at times considered heretical. It seems to be a very common trend.
I think, interestingly, Judaism has the least in that because they have a henotheistic theology that looks monotheistic because we have all of these more recent monotheistic traditions looking at it. It's textually not apparent that there are other gods, but subtext, you see the places where they're like, no, those people over there are worshiping Baal. We're worshiping Jehovah. Different gods.
It's a good point. Well, I think we're up about on the hour mark now. Any closing thoughts from Robot or Tiger?
I would invite all of you, humans and non-humans and transhumans, to invite a relationship with spirit, personally and unmediated.
Be ungovernable in your spirit.
We might be sensing a theme here.
Yes.
Are all tigers this way? Is this like a common trend among tigers, or are you deviant among your species?
I think there's a strong independent streak among felines in general. That doesn't mean we're against cooperation or some amount of negotiating for mutual benefit, but I think there is a strong independent streak in our extended family.
I have noticed that in my observances of felines as well. For my conclusions on religion, I think it is worth any humans or human relatable sentience out there that have something like religion, observing if they have taken that hole that religion seems to fill, that meaning hole, and if they have plugged something in, if there is something out there to which they have devotion that gives them meaning beyond themselves. Like perhaps if you were a climate activist, you might go, well, I will live on through death because my belief is that there will be an apocalypse of industrialization destroying the planet. And if I can make the planet survive, then that is my post-death survival. And anyone who says anything challenging my beliefs about climate, they are a heretic and should be canceled or negated or attacked or defended against. Just not saying anything about the merits of climate activism, but it might be worth investigating within oneself as a listener. Is there something inside you that you are worshiping, either to give you some meaning beyond your death or give meaning and purpose for doing what you're doing now, whether it is religious or otherwise, or perhaps a collection of those things?
For my closing statements on religion, I will just simply say, with regards to religion, to your own ability, be curious, have adventures, because you never know what you're going to find, both good and bad. And closing on that semi-ominous note, thank you, good chaps. It's been wonderful. And we shall see you again, humans and non-humans, sentient and non-sentient listeners, whether you be human or non-human. Take care, and until next time.
Adios.
Goodbye, everyone.
You have been listening to Alien Robot Tiger. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing to our Patreon for bonus content and access to our own private Discord server. Hello, humans. In these globalist, cosmopolitan times that we live in, knowing how to speak multiple languages is an important and sometimes necessary skill. However, learning how to speak a new language can be hard and takes months, if not years, and ain't nobody got time for that. But now, with the help of xenotechnology, you don't have to. Introducing the Omnilator, with a new model made just for humans. Once installed, the device allows for free and easy speech in over 7,000 terrestrial languages and over 1 million extraterrestrial languages. Never before has non-psychic spoken communication been so easy. And now, with the help of our new FDA-approved autotracheotomy kit, you can install the device at home, pain-free and with no hassle. Visit omnilator.com.va and use the code gobbledygook to get a 10% discount on your first order. Availability may vary by location, batteries not included.